Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Tolisano, Director of Psychological Services for the Connecticut Department of Developmental Services. I'd like to welcome you to our video entitled A Positive Behavioral Support Approach for Developmental Disabilities. This is our third video in a series of 3. I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Dr. Tracey Sondik. Dr. Sondik and I have both presented and published on the topic of positive behavioral supports. Welcome, Tracey.
Thanks, Peter. It's nice to co-present again with you on this topic. I am the director of the Behavioral Intervention Service at Connecticut Valley Hospital, part of the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and we are excited to present on this important topic on positive behavioral support plans. I'd like to begin the discussion today about positive behavioral supports and this approach by considering the question, is it possible for an individual to change their behavior? Most of us go into this profession around helping people with challenges by having a deep appreciation for how difficult it is to change behavior. Anyone who has broken a New Year's resolution or set a goal and quickly found that the goal was difficult to achieve recognizes that behavioral change is challenging. There's no single solution that works for everyone. We often expect individuals to immediately change a behavior that they have been struggling with. Oftentimes, this is a behavior they've had for a lifetime, and it's been repeated and reinforced over time. So we have to remember when we start a positive behavioral support plan that we're striving for progress rather than complete change overnight. Progress toward a new behavior takes time, and rather than perfection, we're working toward a process of change. A positive behavioral support approach is a comprehensive perspective that looks at the whole person. Traditional support approaches for challenging behaviors typically followed a medical model. A medical model simply is a model where maladaptive behaviors are conceptualized as a sign of an underlying disease or problem, rather than serving a particular function. That is, for example, if someone is displaying an abnormal behavior, it is because they have a particular diagnosis. For example, Joe acts out because he has schizophrenia. That's just how he is. So that would be a medical model approach. The idea that there is a problem and that there is an expert that can remedy the problem by giving a prescription or giving certain interventions. So it's expert driven. There's a person who knows the answer. A positive behavioral perspective is different. It's not incompatible with a medical model approach, but it is a more holistic approach because it views behaviors as goal-directed. The behavior is serving a purpose. It's interconnected with the person's unique physiology, the situation, their developmental and psychological upbringing, thoughts, feelings, and culture that they live in. So this is a comprehensive approach that includes all of these different facets. In addition, it is not expert-driven. The person is at the center. The consumer and the family and their supports are at the center of the plan, rather than someone coming in and saying this is the solution to the plan. So these holistic approaches are at the heart of a positive behavioral support approach.
As we delve further into the topic of positive behavioral support, let's better understand the definition of the term. So if we think about it in the phrase support for positive behavior is what is desirable, adaptive, and pro-social, meaning it helps the individual to make progress in their life. Support means to be encouraging to increase positive behaviors or to strengthen the existing ones. This is as opposed to a non-positive behavioral support approach, which would use aversive tactics, humiliation, stigmatizing, and so forth. The positive behavioral support term was adopted by Rob Horner in 1990. Another key figure in the field is George Sagai, who developed positive behavior interventions and supports for the school system back in the late 1980s. So when we think about positive behavioral support in practical terms, there's some key ideas. First, as Tracey mentioned, PBIS is centered on doing a functional assessment, which is an information gathering process. We'll be talking about that a bit later in the video, more so in depth. The second part is that we use comprehensive interventions, meaning we use proactive techniques, intensive strategies, crisis plans, reactive strategies, and so forth. We're very key on developing lifestyle enhancement, improving the quality of a person's life through person-centered planning. And lastly, when possible, we try to advocate for a team approach, meaning there's collaboration to support the process. In the way that we describe positive behavioral supports, we have added to this model, as Tracey mentioned, in a comprehensive way across time, and that's reflected in the video today.
So often people will ask, what is the difference between a positive behavioral support and an applied behavioral analysis, or traditional ABA model? So I want to first start by talking about an ABA approach. So applied behavioral analysis is analyzing the interaction between purposeful behavior and a changeable environment. So that's what a traditional behavioral analysis is. A positive behavioral support includes looking at the interaction between behavior and environment. So it includes an ABA analyzation, but it also includes other key factors that make it an ABA plus approach. First, it includes a normalization and an inclusion movement, allowing a person to live in their natural environment, to be part of society, to be included in school systems, university systems, work systems. It's person-centered and family-centered, and the values are emphasized from the person's unique family. We're also using contributions from different models, from medicine, from biology, from developmental psychology, from neuropsychological interventions, and empirical research. So it's an integrative approach. So the main difference, just to reiterate, is that a positive behavioral support plan includes an ABA approach in addition to other modalities. So what are the key components to a positive behavioral support approach? First and foremost is the idea that teaching is the foundation of a PBS approach. So it's proactive teaching of expectations, acceptable behaviors, and skills. Second, the approach includes building on existing behaviors that are already functional or working well for a person, building on strengths. So it's a strengths-based approach. There is ongoing monitoring of problem behaviors. This is often more of that traditional ABA approach of data collection and analyzing the behaviors. And then data-driven in terms of making decisions and evaluating the effectiveness of the plan. We'll spend some time in the video talking about the importance of data collection, how it can help inform the decision and make a positive behavioral support approach truly empirical. There's an intense effort to really support a person so that they eventually can become more independent in their skill acquisition. Improving quality of life is really the cornerstone of any PBS approach. We want people to feel happier in their lives, and we know that when people feel happier, there are less behaviors of concern. And finally, there's an integration of this implementation of skills and how a person responds into their daily life.
The following slide reflects how comprehensive a PBS approach can be. So the slide entitled A Holistic Approach looks at all the different variables that are involved in PBS planning. Everything from family and social determinants to behavior, to sensory issues, to interests and cultural values, to education supports, to medical issues, and also community involvement. One of the things that individuals have indicated is helpful is oftentimes when we talk about a treatment paradigm based on an individual's level of intellectual disability. In reference to this slide, you can look at the first video that Tracey and I did on understanding intellectual disability to better understand those particular levels. If we start at the bottom of the slide, individuals with a severe to profound level of intellectual disability can benefit from positive behavioral support with an emphasis on environmental strategies. When we move up to a moderate level of intellectual disability, we can use skills building, as Tracey mentioned, an emphasis on teaching, as well as a positive behavioral support model. And lastly, when we come to a mild level of intellectual disability, there's a plethora of different techniques that we may use. Positive behavioral supports, psychoeducation, and also psychotherapy in various formats.
One of the key components to understanding a positive behavioral support approach is understanding a person's readiness to change. When I spoke in the beginning of this presentation about the difficulty in changing a behavior, especially a behavior that has been learned over a lifetime and being reinforced, it's really critical to understand a person's readiness. This gives some key clues to where to intervene and what particular interventions might be most effective. So I'm going to discuss a bit about the stages of change so that we can better understand what kind of interventions might work depending on the stage of change. So stage of change model goes back to Prochaska and DiClemente's model of understanding how to work with addiction. And they found over time that the stage of change model could also be applied to behavioral change, even for people that have severe behaviors of concern. We can apply the stage of change model to individuals, to families, and systems. And it's critical to understanding where a person, individual, and system are on this stage to plan accordingly. So I'll speak about the first 3 stages of change. The first stage of change is called pre-contemplation. Pre-contemplation refers to a stage of change where the primary characteristics are denial, poor awareness, or sometimes even rebellion. When a person is in a pre-contemplation stage, or when a family or system is in a pre-contemplation stage, the goal at this point in time in terms of a positive behavioral support approach is really education. It's helping to raise awareness and consciousness in a soft-hearted approach so that a person doesn't become defensive or rebellious. We want a person to begin to understand that there's a discrepancy between their goal and what is actually happening behaviorally. So a pre-contemplation stage is the most challenging stage to work with because often a person's not really committed or ready for change. The second stage is contemplation, and contemplation is really characterized by ambivalence. A person, system, or family are displaying mixed feelings, emotions, and behaviors. On one hand, wanting perhaps to change a behavior, on the other hand, very stuck or committed to the same behavior that might be causing the difficulties. So stage of change language starts to emerge in this contemplation stage. A person may say, I wish I could stop doing this. I want to improve my life. So that is a clue that a person is beginning to emerge into a contemplation stage. The goal at this point, in terms of an intervention from a positive behavioral support plan approach, would be to explore with the person what is the function of the behavior. Avoid dwelling on the negative consequences, but helping them understand how this behavior developed, and that can be a roadmap to how to begin to make changes. The next stage is preparation. This is when a person, system, or family are making steps toward change. So the person may be taking proactive steps by getting ready to make a change, maybe beginning a psychotherapy session, starting to make changes in their daily routine, or at least coming up with some concrete steps.